Hi everyone. In this part of the lecture for this week, we're going to be talking about food insecurity and food security. Now, to really kind of get to what the root of this is, we're going to talk about what is poverty and how do we define poverty. So really there are two types of poverty that we want to concern ourselves with for this lecture. And that is the idea of absolute and relative poverty. Now, relative poverty is when someone is deprived of comforts and privileges that the rest of the people in their society typically enjoy. Whereas absolute poverty would be someone who is lacking in the basic needs for survival and well-being. So, hunger can be both relative and absolute in terms of its impact of poverty. Now, it's important to note we really do produce enough food to feed everyone. However, access to food is incredibly limited in some places. There are really two real limitations to food access. The first is the ability to afford food. That's the idea of that poverty limit of how that impacts your food buying choices. The second is the ability to find food. Now, you may think, I don't know where all you live, but you may think, okay, you just go to the grocery store. So we have a lot of food deserts in this country. And around the world. But so the idea of a food desert is that if someone is not able to buy the foods they need for a healthful diet at a store that is close to them, that's a food desert. So for example, this map I have here is showing places where people have no car and no supermarket store within a mile. So that means they would have to walk more than a mile to get to a supermarket store. What happens in these food deserts often is that convenience stores start to make up the grocery shopping experience. Now, if you think about going to 7-Eleven, Cumberland Farms to buy your groceries for the week, you're going to be incredibly limited in the selection of foods that you actually have access to purchase. So even if you have money for food, you may not have the ability to buy food. So you are going to be food insecure. And that's that idea of food insecurity. Someone may eat a meal, and therefore they are not hungry, but they are still food insecure. So people who need to utilize food kitchens and things like that, they will go and they will have a meal. They will no longer be hungry. They are not worried about their hunger. However, they are still food insecure. They don't know where their next meal, their next set of food is going to come from. So there are a couple ways that we're going to briefly touch upon here to combat hunger and combat food insecurity. Now, the first is through entitlement programs in the US. There are several entitlement programs available to help people not be hungry. I'm phrasing it that way because of some words I'm going to use later. So the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, that used to be the food stamp program, Women, Infants, and Children, WIC, school breakfast and school lunch, these are all entitlement programs. So what that means is that as long as you meet the income requirements, you will be eligible for assistance from these programs. They all provide food in different ways to people. And in providing the food, they are meant to be supplemental. None of these programs are meant to be someone's main source of food or their main source of income to provide foods. So you'll be noticing when you're doing your project this week, you're going to be looking into what the budget is on a SNAP income for food. And there are people that try to use their SNAP money for a complete food set for themselves and their family. And you'll be seeing how difficult that would be. These really are supplemental, and they are there to help people short term. Now, the bigger issue is how to combat hunger worldwide, not just in the US, not just in one country, but how do you combat hunger everywhere? How do you stop people from being food insecure? Now, there are a couple ways, and some of the articles you have this week will go into more depth as to some of these, but I want to touch on these three big ones. The first is education. So we want to educate people about food, how to cook food, how to prepare food, and how to eat food, how to eat healthfully and nutritionally. Now, for example here, beans, as we all know, are very nutritious. They are a great source of fiber and other nutrients, a good source of protein. However, most people don't cook with beans, or if they do, they buy canned beans that are already pre-cooked. Now, those canned beans are relatively expensive compared to raw, uncooked beans, which can be bought for pennies and can really feed people well. So we want to educate people on how to use foods that are available to them. The other thing is to promote self-sustaining farming. The idea that if more people are able to produce at least some of their own food in a small home garden or something like that, that they will be less likely to be food insecure because they will have a supply of food that they are producing. Now, the last one is a, a, a challenging one in some places, but I think it's an important one worldwide, and that's the idea to empower women. There have been many studies, and you have a couple to read this week, about the idea that if you empower women across the world, if you get them involved, give them the power and the equal rights that they deserve, that the empowered women decrease food insecurity. Um, and I'll let you read the articles and come to your own conclusion as to how they do that, why they do that. But the idea that if you empower a woman, food insecurity decreases. So, on that note, I'm kind of going to let us go for the week. And I want you to be thinking about your own food security and food insecurity, and how different things can impact your personal food security levels, as well as what do you think we should do to help people be more food secure. I mean, we do have the food. We can grow the food for everyone. So be thinking about those things as you're reading the articles for this week. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to reading your discussion posts and seeing your assignments for the week. Have a great week, everyone.